A Maryland federal jury convicts Baltimore's former top prosecutor, Marilyn Mosby. Mosby was found guilty of 2 counts of perjury. The jury found she did lie about her finances to withdraw money from her city retirement account under a program designed to help people struggling financially during the coronavirus pandemic. Prosecutors said she falsely claimed to suffer from financial hardships to access $90,000 from retirement funds that she later used to buy 2 homes in Florida. Mosby has maintained her innocence. A reporter tried to get a comment from Mosby as she exited the courthouse.
Mosby is coming out right now. Here we go, here we go. Let's see if she has any comment.
Mr. White, do you have any comment?
Any comment?
No comment?
Any comment?
Do you plan to appeal this?
What do you want to say to the people of Baltimore? Anything?
I'm blessed. I have nothing else to say. Ms. Mosby, were you surprised by the verdict?
Ms. Mosby, do you plan to appeal this ruling?
Mr. White,
Any reaction at all?
this seems upsetting.
You can see there.
Let's go to our panel with this breaking news. Lauren Victoria Burke from Black Press USA. Dr. Carr will be joining us shortly, as well as Teresa Lundy, principal and founder of TML Communications in Philadelphia. Hey, y'all. Let me tell you something. They got another one of our black politicians, child, on this doggone finance fraud stuff. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is up there in Manhattan acting a plumb fool, but not facing any kind of criminal liability. Lauren, I'll go to you first. What is your reaction to this Marilyn Mosby verdict?
Sorry, everybody. My reaction is similar to what you just said. We see a lot of black elected officials getting prosecuted. In this case, this prosecution started with a prosecutor named Leo Wise, who has a long history and an uncanny knack for prosecuting black elected officials that goes all the way back to when he was in the Office of Congressional Ethics, prosecuting an unusually high number of black members of Congress. He's not on the case anymore, but still, this was a case that involved Marilyn Mosby effectively taking out her own money from an account. I'm not sure why that would reach the level that this has reached now. Of course, she's now getting hit with a perjury charge. That's interesting. I mean, I think with all the things that are going on in Baltimore, you would think that there'd be other things that prosecutors would be focused on. And I have to say, when we look at a lot of the black female prosecutors who have been in the spotlight over the last few years, and she's been one of them, there's been some interesting things that have happened to them. Rachel Rollins comes to mind. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not a big believer in coincidence when I see black elected officials being prosecuted. I'm just not. We see on the blue-collar level a disproportionate prosecution of black people. There's no reason we wouldn't see it on the white-collar level. So I reserve judgment, and I will read the case, but I feel a sense of suspicion, quite frankly.
I think that's very reasonable. I mean, to your point, she was not allowed to make the case that it was her own money that was coming from the retirement fund. The prosecutor suggested that this still belonged to the city, and that's why she committed perjury by trying to get access to it. But Teresa, to Lauren's point, a lot of prosecutors are under the spotlight, especially if you're a Baltimore politician. They love to go after black Baltimore politicians. Is this one of those cases where, knowing that spotlight, she should have been a little bit more making sure that she had her T's crossed and her I's dotted? What do you think?
I think any elected official, especially African Americans, we all know we're going to be under the spotlight, under the gun, daily. So it is really up to us to make sure we hire the right consultants and just to make sure that, we are following the law to the T. I think there is likely a lot of misinformed information that is not released to the public. Mm-hmm. But right now, we're just seeing the headline as in, Marilyn Mosby convicted, and we're not, unless you're reading, it says perjury. And so, for her, she might have thought she was telling the truth, or, it could have been a half truth. But whatever it might have been, I think there was just some miseducation on some of the finance laws, which can be complex. I know here in PA, if you're running for a local office and then you decide to run for Congress, it can get very difficult if you don't have the right consultants or if you're not reading some of the audited information for the finance report yourself. So it definitely can get complicated, but the investment on the back end is probably the most helpful, especially so you don't get into these type of situations.
Right. That's a good point. I mean, I know, listen, most of us have many of us, I shouldn't say many of us have 401ks. We have retirement accounts. At some point or another, we've taken money out. And so that tends to be the kind of thing where you don't necessarily expect to have to hire accountants and lawyers and things to get access to. One of the interesting parts about this, though, because it is perjury, you do have to approve intent. And I wonder, Lauren, I'm going to go to you on this, if the fact that she's a Black woman gives her less of the benefit of the doubt. We have seen other Black politicians who have been targeted with prosecution related to finances. Andrew Gillum is somebody who comes to mind, and he actually did not get convicted. Do you think that her being a Black woman played even more of a role in this case and the outcome of this case?
Not in this particular case. I think they like to go after Black people in power. I think Black people in power, whether they be male or female or under a microscope, it just does so happen that we have a historic sort of group of Black women prosecutors, though, who are out there on the scene right now, sort of coming of age. Certainly Fannie Willis is. But Marilyn Mosby was one of those prosecutors in a major city. But when I think about just historically, and someone had done a book on this, on Black elected officials being prosecuted. He's a Maryland professor. I'm sorry I don't have his name. On Black elected officials being prosecuted. And of course, most of his cases are men because it was mostly male elected officials in office when he wrote the book. But Brian Benjamin is a pretty good recent example. So is Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum, you know, let's be real. The big announcement, the drama, all the counts that are being announced, and you saw the Brian Benjamin presser, the counts and the drama, and we've got them. We've got charts and graphics and all this, and the entire case totally fell apart. It was a big flop, a big nothing burger, and nothing came of it. So we have to sort of wait, to me, for details. Even when they get prosecuted, I'm like waiting for details, even when there's a conviction. So I'm a little bit, again, I'm very suspicious.
Now, Brian Benjamin, refresh my recollection, he was the lieutenant governor, right? And he ended up having to resign as a result. And then, to your point, it was a big nothing burger. Do I have that right? Everything
That's right. The lieutenant governor of New York, and could have been the governor of New York, because Andrew Cuomo then got in trouble not too long. I mean, to me, it's sort of like, I just feel like when Black elected officials get prosecuted, we need to pay special attention. I remember when Shaka Fatah got prosecuted. He was serving on the very powerful money committee in Congress. To this day, nobody can articulate to me exactly what he did that was wrong. He got prosecuted and went to jail. And when you get these cases where nobody can articulate in a plain sentence what happened, I'm suspicious. I've read his case and I still didn't understand it. I'm just saying, given the history of our country, I'm suspicious of many of these prosecutions.
I mean, me too, and I'm also suspicious that it's only Black people out here doing this stuff, because we ain't even in that high numbers, and yet it seems to be that the prosecutions always skew towards the Black. But Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right, because if we really look at the history, going to Lauren's point, Black elected officials who have substantial power that is governing over dollars and cents of taxpayers and maybe looking like they have a future to move up in public office, the scrutiny gets higher with any position that you get in. Look, and I know you mentioned Congressman Fatah, but he's been in, Congress for over 20-something years. He earned that position. And so, even with that case, because obviously he was out of Philadelphia, just knowing some of the ins and outs of it, it was almost like, they were looking for a degree of issue. And so when you're able to find one, when you start to look 10 and 15 years back into elected officials, you for whatever, the target is there. And so it really, if we kind of got to go back to basics when you start running for public office, is really taking care of your back end so it protects you and secures you in the future, so we don't have these type of issues where, one, you're getting perjured on the stand because of maybe some information you did not know was true or was not. But at the end of the day, Marilyn Mosby took her money and try to use it for her campaign to make sure that she can get elected without asking the taxpayer for, those who wanted to support her for small dollar donations.
Well, technically she was using it to buy a house, but to your point, I look at retirement money as my money, so I would have been shocked as all hell if somebody told me that I was committing a crime, regardless of what I said on somebody's forms, getting my own money that I contributed. I got to bring in our man, Dr. Carr, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. The reason why I want to come to you, Dr. Carr, is because in addition to the fact that Black politicians are mostly targeted when it comes to these kind of financial prosecutions, they find very few allies when they are under the gun. I mean, just last week, I don't know if you saw Kwame Kilpatrick putting President Obama on blast, talking about how we used to be homies, but you left me hanging when I was in jail. And I'm not saying that President Obama should have done anything different. I don't know who could have came to Marilyn Mosby's aid here, but talk a little bit, if you have anything to chime in on that issue of kind of how when you get caught up in these, you just on your own on this one.
About my friend and colleague Derek Musgrove, who wrote a whole book on this in terms of the selective persecution, in fact, of Black elected officials. This isn't about their politics. This isn't about anything other than the fact that when it comes to, quote unquote, the law in this country, it's selective prosecution. Perhaps if Marilyn Mosby had said something nice about Donald Trump or ran into him somewhere in the streets and said, "Oh, I like your tie," he would have intervened or something like that. But the simple fact of the matter is that, Black politicians, the higher up the food chain you go, the more timid they are. That's simply the simple fact. It's a simple fact of the matter. Sure, Kwame Kilpatrick, the hip hop mayor of Detroit, yeah, he got in trouble, and some of it his own doing, of course.
Right.
But he's not a white man.
Yeah.
And Marilyn Mosby, this is completely outsized. It's absurd. Black people think you can somehow demonstrate to this society that somehow you are cleaner than average by adhering to the rule of law. That's simply not the case. This is a political prosecution.
Right.
You're trying to crucify Marilyn Mosby. And of course, Barack Obama wasn't going to do anything. What do y'all expect Barack Obama to do? He's a creature of the political system. He's not going to intervene. We're still paying the bill for him being president 2 times. And meanwhile, he's off with his wife making $1 billion with Netflix, and we're stuck with the bill called Donald Trump and everything else. Marilyn Mosby was politically crucified today, and there's nothing else to say about it.
Well, I want to stay with you a little bit longer because you do have the law expertise here. She still has another case. Now, the date hasn't been set around charges of mortgage fraud. And she chose not to go to testify in this case, which is a very short actual trial, because there were threats about her being able to be, whatever she said, potentially being used to bring more charges to her. What do you think is next for Marilyn Mosby after this perjury conviction and with the additional charges she's facing?
I have no idea. Again, I would think that, her lawyers and, of course, our brother Scott, who they were able to get up out the paint at the threat of trying to snatch his license behind some BS, would be much better positioned to talk about that. But will she try to negotiate a plea? I mean, I would think, I'm thinking about my friends who are practicing attorneys who may advise her to try to do that. I mean, again, don't subject yourself to a bench trial or a jury trial where these folk think somehow they are upholding the rule of law by applying rules to you that aren't applied evenly across the board. I mean, I suspect she probably has some legal advice that might be like, see, can you negotiate a plea and so that you don't have to face this type of situation again. But quite frankly, I think I'm probably as much at a loss as what she's going to do now in that case as anybody else who's just kind of observing.
Right. Well, I hope for the best for her, because she's facing more time in jail than the Freddie Gray killers and anybody else that she tried to bring to justice in that and all of the other cases that she tried. Some of them, no, she was not doing what she was supposed to do. She was doing some overzealous prosecution. So I ain't saying she's totally innocent, but on this one, it definitely seems like she is getting a raw deal.